Welcome to Coast View, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, look, you know this because it's in the opening of the show that I'm the former publisher of the Sun Herald, and I also worked as the president publisher over in Mobile and New Orleans as well, and had responsibilities later in my career for newspapers and digital assets in 5 different states. And you know what I've learned a lot about the changing media landscape. And you know, the reality is every media has been impacted. Every single media has been impacted. This radio station has been impacted. And the key to success, let's speak to the radio station specifically. The key to success has been that Steve Davenport, the guy that owns SuperTalk Mississippi Media, which is 26 radio stations across the United States, he decided he was going to amass this sort of privately owned company and not join in and be part of this big conglomerate which was taking over the radio industry, and stay local. And because he stayed local, he's been very, very successful. If you look at the Sun Herald and where they are today, they've had a lot of issues, and it's not their fault. It's just that the digital reality has essentially almost entirely put printed newspapers out of business. That's just the way it is. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. You know, the good news is that if you look back across sort of the reporter landscape over the past many years, there's still some familiar faces. You know, I think of my friend Anita Lee, for example, and many others at the Sun Herald they're still there. Blake Kaplan is the executive director, executive editor, and general manager, and he's got responsibilities beyond Biloxi and Mississippi Gulf Coast as well. I had a great conversation recently with Brad Cassie, and you know, we rebuilt the history, talked about some cool stories along the way, talked about the changing media landscape. He actually mentioned during the conversation great to have seized veterans still with his organization WLOX, and one of the was Bill Snyder. And I'm really pleased now to bring Bill Snyder into the conversation, and we're going to spend a whole show telling some stories about WLOX and Bill Snyder. He left, he came back, had a terrific experience at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. But anyway, without any further ado, Bill, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing terrific, Ricky. Thanks for having me on. And the best part about this, at least today, we're inside, so that's a win. All across the board. Have
you ever experienced? I mean, look, I'm telling you, I've lived in my life. The heat has been unbearable.
This morning, actually, the mornings haven't been too bad, but as soon as the sun comes up, you get to about 7:30, forget about it, you know. And that was my story today. You know, getting your work done if you're working outdoors before the heat gets crazy and you got to stop every 5 minutes. So. I'm not used to this in June, and you probably don't remember that either. I don't remember it being this warm in June, maybe July, August, September, but not in June. So I don't know what that means. I don't try to read the tea leaves on that. You just try to survive in advance.
Yeah, there's no doubt. You know, the thing that if there's a concern, it is this. It's that we're seeing water temperatures off our coast because of this dome.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
In June. It's incredible that we're experiencing that now. And what will that mean for the already predicted active tropical season? It will encourage rapid intensification if all the other atmospheric conditions are contributing. But let's hope that's not the case. You know, you've seen some tough times in your days, haven't you?
Man, let me tell you. So I always tell everybody Camille was the easy one because I was a year old and my mom says I slept through it. Okay. So that was the easy one. But I remember Hurricane Frederick. That was the first storm that really I can remember. And that was pretty scary. That was no picnic. We had Elena, which was coming at us, left, and then came back. You know, that was a daylight storm, and we were outside looking at the eye. But then, you know, we had a few others. But then, of course, Katrina, that's just a game changer. And, you know, the work, I always tell people, I love doing my job, and you love being in broadcasting and everything. But the work all of us did, not only at WLOX, but the Herald, all over in the days, weeks, and months after the storm, I was like, wow, this is why I got into this business, because a lot of that was life-saving information, and it was not easy. You guys had to scramble, we had to scramble, but everybody was cranking out really what I thought was their best stuff. So as I say that, I don't really want to go through that again. So
no, man, me neither. I think we're better prepared this time. I definitely think that. We'll come back to Katrina in a second, because literally that's a defining moment for so many of us who were in the news business back in those days. But let's take a step back for a second, Bill. Where did you grow up, and then when did it occur to you that reporting was something you wanted to really aspire for?
It's funny, Ricky. I was a TV radio geek when I was a kid. That was back when we did AM in the 70s. I'd listen to WWL. Monday Night Football was on KMOX in St. Louis. And then I'd fall asleep. And, that was my thing when I was you remember the electric football games with the guys vibrating, they're doing like that. I would get the tape recorder. I would turn on the desk lamp, and I'd put it on the field, and I would do play-by-play, which is, if you can do play-by-play on electric football, you can do anything. So, because you're going, well, he's over here. Now he's on the, so. But I used to have we used to do that, and that was back when we got all the New Orleans stations and the Mobile stations, and I just turned into a junkie, to be honest. And from there, got to do radio over at Coast 102 and WGCM AM. Got to do my practicum up at Southern Miss, covering at that time was one of the few teams that had a football team with Brett Favre, basketball with Clarence Weatherspoon, and baseball with Coach Hill Denson, and a lot of Coast guys go to a bowl game and both NCAA tournaments. And I got to cover that as a college reporter, and then radio, and it just kind of evolved from there. And, you just want to be involved. You want to know what's going on. You want to give people info, and you want to just paint that picture for them. It was always like our old broadcasting teachers would say, when you're telling a story, it's almost like you're talking to grandma. Hey, grandma, guess what happened today? A kangaroo got loose in Gulfport. How about that? Or, something not so pleasant. But that's the way they taught us, and that's what I enjoy doing. And you know what it is, as we get more seasoned, it's kind of fun telling those stories,
No, it is. It's interesting. You mentioned WWL, and I don't know the time frame for when you became sort of interested in WWL, but I have this very clear memory of being in the car with my sisters headed to school, my dad driving, and listening to Ruby in the Morning on WWL. Was that your time frame? I can't remember.
Yes. Kind of in the 70s. I'll admit this. I was a bit of a sickly child. I had sinus problems all the time. So, I'd be at home and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get my 7-Up here, my Kleenex, and I'm going to listen to Ruby and this other guy. And there was Eric Tracy, I think, in that. Yeah. And so this is really TV, radio junkie stuff. There was a shooting spree over there, and this guy, it was just one of those. He was in the French Quarter, and I was glued to it.
Hey, let me tell you. I'm going to tell you. I remember it like Mark Essex.
Yes, the Howard Johnson's thing.
How about that?
So he was shooting, and that is an amazing and frightening and scary story that almost relates to some of the scary stuff happening today. It scared me to death.
Yes.
And now Treasure Bay, how it's got those elevators on the side. The downtown Howard Johnson's where that happened was built the exact same frame. So I was like, look, we don't need to drive by there. I was like, but then they brought in the helicopter, and that was just an amazing, gripping story. But back then, they'd paint the picture with radio. There was a grain elevator explosion one day, and I went in and did these storyboards, and my dad's looking at me like, what is going on with you? And I was like, Dad, this is the news, so, but that's how you paint the picture, having, radio, like just kind of like we're doing here. And then of course, now you can use pictures and all kinds of stuff. So,
yeah, it's interesting. But it's interesting that even though the technology has changed, and certainly digital has changed the world, it really has, because now everyone can be a reporter. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, the tools they have available to them today, I mean, it really disintermediated news in a way. But you know what? It's interesting that at the core of what you do, at the core of what I do even today, is that you have to have the ability to tell a story. You have to have the ability to do storytelling and be authentic and honest and trustworthy. And all those things are really important. You know, people forget that even in the form that you and I are in this moment, that the relationship we have with our audience is incredibly important, and they don't want to see you fake it. I mean, people will figure that out so fast it will make your head spin if you're not genuine. I mean, it's true, isn't it?
It's absolutely true. My first TV job was up at WAPT in Jackson, okay, the ABC station there. At the time, they were a distant third place. It's WAPT. They said the call letters were "We Are Play TV," and that's what I walked into. But there were some pretty good people there, and my first ever live shot, since I've been back in the last 4 years at WLOX, I've done thousands. I stopped counting at 5,000. The very first one, I had my notebook and I was trying to do the notes, and it was a train wreck. So one of the reporters was like, you know, when I hear you talking, Bill, you're pretty good at ad-libbing. Why don't you try that? And what I've noticed, Ricky, is there are folks that can go script and subject verb beautiful. There are others with bullet points. So, but the main thing, like you said, is telling that story, being genuine. Hey, this is really cool. Hey, we had a tragedy today.
Yeah.
Let's be honest about it. And that's what keeps you going. And that's what you relate with your viewers and your listeners.
That's the key. That's the key to success. Just be yourself and be authentic. This is Bill Snyder, reporter at WLOX, and I'm just enjoying. We're going to have a whole show today focused on interesting points in his career. We'll see you back after this. Welcome back to Coast View. We're having a really fun and enlightening conversation with my friend Bill Snyder. And we're WLOX. You know him. You know his face. You know his voice really well. I had the opportunity to do a keynote at the beginning of the 20th anniversary of the One Coast that we started at the Sun Herald back 20 years ago. And I challenged the group, and it was a real opportunity. I was honored to have that opportunity. But afterwards, Bill and I kind of struck up a conversation. And I said, you know what, man, you need to come on Coast View. And he said, I'd love to do that. And, you know, one thing led to another. And so here he is. What I would say about you, Bill, is that for your entire tenure and so many different roles along the way, you've always been, as we were discussing in this last segment, you've always seemed super motivated, passionate about what you do, authentic in what you do, and good at what you do. And it's a real pleasure to chat with you and get to know you better. We ran into each other all along the way, but really never knew each other. So it's interesting.
We're 3 steps ahead thinking about other stuff. And it's like, you know, and then you think about it later. You're like, oh, I wish we could have, you know, I've been like,
yeah, I know.
You know.
That's the way. Yeah. Hey, I say it all the time. You know, this show has provided me an opportunity to have deep conversations with people. Listen, we've had over 600 conversations in the past little over 2 years. And the reason I do it is because I want to make a difference, and I want to help educate people. I want to have interesting conversations with people like you. But I never got a chance to do that when I was the CEO of a company. I just didn't. I mean, I'm just being honest about it. I didn't have the time. There were always these competing interests, and now I don't have P&L. I'm retired now, but I come in and do this show, and I get to learn things about people that I never had the opportunity to stop long enough to find out. And, you know, you included.
So Dave Vincent, the former news director at WLOX, it was same way. You know, he was news director. He's trying to, you know, and I was like, man, Dave really doesn't lighten up. You know, now I run into him. He gives me a hug. He's a world traveler. And that's what happens. You take that mental load off, and you can actually function a little bit, you know, and I'll get there one day. But, you know, you still try to stop and smell the roses. They always talk about work-life balance, and that's what you try to do, and it's not easy. It's not easy at all.
No, it's not. But you know what? I've tried to, you know, what I try to do is through people like you and the others that I talk to, I don't necessarily try to share all of my learnings, but it is the perspective that I gained that enables me to hear what you just said and add to it. And I would say one of the themes of this show, frankly, is that we have to do a better job of living in the moment, no matter where we are in our lives. We can't do anything about what happened yesterday. We can't. And we have no promise about tomorrow. Now, we can plan for tomorrow, and everybody needs to do that. But this is the moment that is guaranteed, that we're in right now. And what are we going to do to make the best of it? And that's my commitment to this show, is not only to share that lesson and keep that lesson fresh for people, but also to actually do it, to live by example. And that's been really important to me.
Yeah, and the best part with doing this, I think I told you, I compared my career in a weird way to Dick Vermeil, the former coach of the Eagles. Remember, he got burned out. And I'll be honest, I was there after Katrina doing sports. And even going into that year before Katrina, I was like, man, I'm not fired up about football. I don't know why. It was because my son was a year old and I was kind of in a transition or starting. And I got out and worked at Gulf Coast, still had some TV rate. We did a football show with Coach Campbell and had a blast. And then working at Mississippi Power, doing a lot of video and writing and those kind of things. And then I was sitting there and watching, and I was like, you know what? It was calling me back, and I didn't realize it, and I was fighting it. So that's why I use that. And when Vermeil got back, he went to the Rams, and they went to the Super Bowl a few years later. But he said, I got out because I had to. Now I'm back in because I have to be. So that was kind of it. It was like I had all this stuff going on, and I was like, you know what? Let's go pick up the camera and do some things, So,
but what's interesting about that move to Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College and to Mississippi Power, because I watched you do that. Mm-hmm. It was it was probably the right thing for you at the time. I mean, it not only gave you a breather, but it also gave you an opportunity to gain some more perspective. And so you're coming back to WLOX, you're wiser, you broaden your perspective, you know more about corporate America and educational system or whatever. You know more about life just because you're a little bit older, And
what you learn too, Ricky, is that this job, you're a journalist. We try to be objective, we try to paint the picture, but there's also a lot of PR in it. And when you get out and get back in, you realize that. Now, obviously, there's some stories where you can't, but there's other ones where you'll do some things with a company or a source, and it's kind of an informational thing. But then down the road, if something happens and I can call that person or text them and say, hey, you remember we did that? And that's where it's about building relationships. And I'm sure you talked about that. And it helps because when we do something with the college, I know exactly who to contact. We did something last week out at Plant Watson with Mississippi Power, and we did all kinds of stuff like that. I ran into a guy. We did a story where he put together this Lego thing, and it was a safety training thing, and it made me think of it. So that helped me when I was doing that story. So you build those relationships, you live and learn, and that's where it all goes. I used to think, and you were probably brought up with this too, where our fathers or we had uncles and aunts or whatever that were at the same place for 30 to 40 years and just extremely loyal. And that doesn't mean that's not a negative connotation. It's just the way it was. But the way the world has evolved, it's almost like you kind of need to be in some different roles to educate yourself, get those experiences, and build those relationships, I think. And, at this point.
I had a great conversation with Angela Geis, Reed Geis's daughter, who's gone to Hollywood and doing some incredible production work. I mean, she did all the promotion for the Kardashians on Hulu, and she's working with Netflix and ABC and Disney, and so it's unbelievable what she's doing. But one of the parts of our conversation that I thought was so important, a lot of young people today, they want instant gratification, and they even teach classes about this generation. Yeah. And one of the points that she and I talked about during our conversation was that you cannot skip steps. You can't. The maturation process, the development process requires you to do your reps. John Harrison and I had a whole hour together recently, and we talked about that as well. That That's the only way to really prepare yourself for where you want to go. And I think as you get older, this should be the case. It's not always the case, but as you get older, you become more aware of how important it is to gain perspective, and I say it all the time. People probably get tired of me saying it, but I believe this, that the more we learn, the more we better learn how much we don't know. And that keeps us thirsty for more information. That keeps us humble. And young people, the big lesson there is do your reps, work hard, and build your experiential opportunities, and great things will happen to you as well. But it's really served you well in your life, hasn't it?
I feel like it has. I'll give you an example of that. I was getting my hair cut a couple of weeks ago, and I was sitting in the chair. I learned, it's probably not a smart idea to shave in the shower when you don't have a mirror, because apparently she was like, you don't have any sideburns, man, and I was like, wait. She was like, you shave in the shower, don't you? And I was like, wait. Then she was like, uncross your legs while you're getting a haircut. And I'm like, wait. She goes, because you're actually crooked. And I'm going, okay. And I'm like, what is happening here? And then the other one, there was another one. Oh, she was like, don't use extremely hot water when you're washing your hair. And she goes, because the few follicles you have left are going to get damaged. And I was like, man, you talk about some tough love. But I was kind of excited because I learned something, So
yeah.
It was tough, but that happens every day, though.
Life, like I said with Bill Lavers, life is the box of chocolate, man. You never know what you're going to get. And I like to approach it that way. I really do.
That's the part about the job. You do something different every day, and I still love that. There are people that can go in, crank it out in the office, and have the routine. I set up things, but a lot of times it's a blank canvas. You never know what's going to happen, and I still kind of enjoy that unpredictability about doing this job, because it is, when you think you've got it figured out, something else comes out of nowhere. Yeah,
it's a dynamic situation. So, how do you think about the bill that left the WLOX and went to Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College and Mississippi Power, and the bill that you are today? How have you changed beyond the stuff that we just talked about? But just how has your perspective changed?
A lot more patience with myself, and I'm a lot more forgiving with myself. When I was doing sports, I would go watch I'd go watch my show. What did I do wrong? That kind of thing. And as I've gotten a little more mature and a little more seasoned, I realized, hey, wait a minute. You are an imperfect being. Even when I thought I threw a perfect show or did a perfect thing, there was something I could improve. And then I see some of the best ever, all of us, that, hey, wait a minute, it's not going to be perfect. And sometimes those plans you made, you got to scrap them. So you learn by doing, and you learn to be patient with yourself.
We're having a great conversation with my friend Bill Snyder from WLOX. When we come back, we'll talk about some real big stories that happened along the way that impacted Bill. We'll see you after this. We're having a visit with WLOX reporter Bill Snyder, somebody that you know the sound of his voice for sure if you're listening on the radio, your favorite podcast. But if you're on YouTube or Facebook, you know the face really well. And he's a genuine guy who cares deeply about coastal Mississippi, and he's seen it all. I want to go into some story ideas or story experiences, but you actually mentioned one a few minutes ago that wasn't during your time at WLOX. It was actually your time at Southern Miss. But this whole era of sports that included Brett Favre and Witherspoon and all of that. I was a publisher of the first book I had the opportunity to be part of. We published the Brett Favre book at the Sun Herald. But what a great moment that was in sports history for Mississippi, wasn't it?
It really was. And when Southern Miss and Ole Miss were playing in the baseball regional, I started thinking about that, like how awesome this is for the state, how awesome it was last year that the Bulldogs won, how awesome it is they played the regional. Of course, I was rooting for Southern Miss, but I was like, hey, if we lose, it's okay, because Mississippi, because we get trashed nationally still. And I get tired of that. It's like, we got some good stuff going on here. And that period you talked about when, Brett comes out of the defensive backfield and suddenly becomes a Heisman Trophy candidate. The 2 games he played when I was at Southern against Mississippi State and up there the next year, standing room only. And it was a Magnolia State thing, because that first year, they beat Florida State in Jacksonville, and we were going crazy. And, State comes in, spoils the party. And that's happened so many times. That's why I wish they'd get, State and Southern Miss have played football a little more. And I wish they'd get Ole Miss involved in that. And I think having that baseball series in Hattiesburg, just that, even though I know we didn't score, but in Ole Miss, except last night when they lost, they hadn't lost a game in the NCAA tournament. So we ran into a buzzsaw. But just all that, it's the kids now are living through that time and living back then. And then basketball, we got Clarence Witherspoon. Went to the tournament twice. Then Coach Denson, I got to go take my recorder, and we had a Scotty Jurich from St. Martin, Chad Hebert from D'Iberville played on those teams. They went to the tournament, and those things, you treasure those, and you remember that stuff better than, maybe a couple of things you wrote down during a news conference, because they just impact you so much, There's
no doubt about that. And you're right about, it's great to see our athletic teams doing well, because it does create a positive focus for Mississippi. That stigma, we're always going to have to overcome it. But to some respect, we still have work to do. I was looking the other day at a graphic assessment it's shown graphically of what's happened with population in the last 10 years, and Mississippi is not doing well. And Jackson, Mississippi, Bill, this is incredible to me. Jackson, Mississippi is in the top 10 of population loss in the past 10 years. Jackson, Mississippi. The coast, by the way, I would say is the lone bright spot. Harrison County having growth. And that's one of the reasons I think coastal Mississippi has to – we're doing a much better job. Katrina sort of helped us with this, bringing everybody together so we can get on the same page and work together. We don't have the infighting we used to have. Our mayors can get together when it's important. But we got to – we have to keep our act together, because we have to fight for every dollar we get. And, if I were the legislature, I'd be betting the ranch on coastal Mississippi because of the industries that are here, the economic driver we are, et cetera. Bill, so let's come to WLX for just a second. You think about your time there. Katrina, obviously the pinnacle moment. We'll come back to Katrina in a second. What sticks out to you in terms of stories that you were involved in?
So I was thinking about one I did. So I was from 91. When I got out of school, I interned, and then I'd go shoot video. I remember Doug Walker, when Doug was the assignment editor, I'd work on a daily basis, and he'd go get the petty cash and pay me $60. I miss those kind of days, but I did that, and I was in Jackson. Then I think 94, I started working for the Capitol Bureau. We had a bureau up there. We'd do our stories, put them together in our office, and then send them to the coast and to a few other places in the state via satellite. And I was thinking about this the other day. We did one on this guy who worked for Wildlife and Fisheries. His job was to go around and blow up beaver dams. And I went, somebody told me that, and went, hold it. And, the light bulbs start going off. I was like, you have got to get me with this man, So we went and did a story with him, and he'd go find a dam, because it would dam up rivers, and it would cause a lot of problems like backwater flooding and stuff. There was all these domino effects to it. He'd make sure the beaver wasn't there, and he'd go and blow it up, and then he'd go find another one. And I was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard of. But it was necessary, and I thought about it the other day. I was like, wow, this is nuts. And, there's been famous people here. We had fun with JoJo when JoJo the kangaroo got loose. And I think of stuff like that. Of course, the impactful ones, you think about Officer McKeithen, that tragic shooting, and covering that, and all the storms. The thing a couple of months ago or a while back over at the hotel in Gulfport, that whole time I was thinking, wow, there's nowhere immune to this type of thing, because it happened here. And so those you think about, but you put them in the back of your mind, and try to remember the positive and the fun ones. So those are a few just right off the bat. That guy blowing up I was like, we're going to get video of a guy blowing up something, and it's okay. And I was like, Well,
in the day of social media and TikTok and all of that, you could have really created something really that was viewed a bunch of times with a story like that, couldn't you?
Yeah. Oh, there was another one. My kids, I have a 17-year-old son, 14-year-old daughter. It's on YouTube. We did one of those drunk driving stories with AAA and the Highway Patrol. They had it. They'll never do this now, but back then they had us basically get drunk and try to do the test to see if we were sober. And, but they can't do that anymore. There's too many restrictions and red tape. But, back then I had a designated driver to take me home afterwards. And that was a fun one on a bunch of different levels. And I showed them, and they're like, how are you able to do that? And I was like, well, simpler times, kids. So, yeah.
Hey, Bill, what's interesting, if you go back and, just growing up around here and seeing the evolution of the economy and whatever, but I always think if you look back, one of the biggest stories in coastal Mississippi for sure was gaming and what gaming has provided to coastal Mississippi. It's been amazing how that industry is really taking this entire community to the next level.
It really has. And you remember we had the riverboats, and then it just kind of evolved from there. And I think even after Katrina, they realized, look, we've got to be able to adjust, because it's just like Camille. Nobody thought there was going to be another Camille. Well, not in my lifetime, that kind of thing. So, but I think that really established in a weird way that we're going to keep gaming, because we can adjust to these storms because it's so important to our economy, and not just the gambling aspect. The people that come here, that come down and just spend a few days here. Maybe they'll go to the Maritime Museum. Maybe they'll go to Oro O'Keefe. Maybe they'll ride the sailfish. Marine life, when we had that, the aquarium now. So and I've noticed when I talk to tourists, they'll say, oh, some are here for, we'll gamble a little bit, but that's just a small part of it. It's a much bigger envelope, and it's been huge, and it's going to continue to be huge, because that is also evolving as well.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you see the proliferation of gaming across the United States, but coastal Mississippi casinos continue to hold their own, even through difficult economic times, even through the pandemic. We've had terrific leadership. That's one thing that's really helped us. The fact that casinos around the world during the pandemic were looking to coastal Mississippi to say, now, how did you do that? How did you open so fast? What are the things you put in place? I mean, they literally completely reconfigured their gaming floors and how they did cleaning stations for employees, how they ran their restaurants. I mean, it was a complete remake. And the fact that they were able to do that in sort of concert with one another to reopen and make this economy be able to hum as best it could in that moment. Other companies around the world were paying attention to them. We're a leader in that way. That's good to see, isn't it?
Oh, it's terrific. And when I talk to folks, if I'm on the beach or somewhere and I'll see some folks from out of town, and I've got a lot of that in my dad in me, he would just stop and talk to anybody. And I'm kind of like that too, especially when I'm out and about. They always say the same thing. Everyone here is so nice. And I tell them, yeah, it's not a fake thing. We really try to be nice to folks, and they love. That's what they love about being down here, is everybody, for the most part, is pretty genuine, and they love treating people like they're our neighbor or they're our friend, and they really are. And I think that, and that goes back to the leadership, like you said, but it also to our employees, because they're part of the community. They want it to succeed too.
They do. They definitely do. Hey, we're having a great conversation with my friend Bill Snyder, who is with WLOX. And when we come back, I want to we'll spend the final segment talking about what we both learned as a result of Hurricane Katrina and what it was like to work for WLOX during those really trying days and months and weeks after Katrina. We'll see you after this break.
Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. Again, I say this all the time. The conversations I have during the breaks are some of the better conversations. It really is. Bill and I just sharing war stories, and I don't know. Here's how I would describe what you and I were just talking about, Bill. We were sharing passion with each other. Our passion for what we do and why we do what we do and why it matters to us. And I loved having that conversation. And you know what? We've never had more passion, more commitment. We've never learned more as people, as leaders in the community, as reporters, and people who had responsibility to make sure the story is being told than Hurricane Katrina. We knew it was going to be bad, but we had no idea it was going to be this bad. And just really quickly, I'll say this. It changed me as a leader in so many different ways. One of the things I wanted to really focus on is the role the Sun Herald was going to play in saving lives in the future. So working with FEMA on flood maps and how communication happens. And, there were a lot of failures in the system because they'd never seen this before. But the reality was I wanted to focus a lot on how do we rebuild this community in a way that's safe, that can save lives? And then everything else sort of poured out of that. But it was one of those moments in your career where it changed you as a reporter, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Leading up to that, we had all those false alarms with Ivan the year before. We had a little wind from that. I think it was Hurricane Dennis, I believe, earlier that year. And we had a tropical storm right after the 4th of July. And I remember the Tuesday before Katrina was my day off. I'm out playing at the Broadwater Sun Course. Sometimes I'd go and play 18 and I had this weird feeling. I was like, I don't, something's not right. I could feel it. And I wasn't thinking it was going to be a storm. I just didn't know. I was like, something's coming. I don't know what it is. And then as soon as everything fell into place, I was like, okay, and Brad, Kessie and I, the news, we were out shooting the night before, and he was going, okay, this is 15 feet. So the water will be up here. And I'm going, come on, and it devolved before our eyes. And it went from, man, the wind's blowing pretty good to, my whole family's from here. I was literally thinking, I'm going to be like that poor man in Pass Christian who lost his family in Camille. I'm going to go here. My parents are going to go at my house. I'm going to lose my brother in Ocean Springs, my sister, and you start having all that. And then afterwards, you realize this was no joke. Our lives have changed. And then you go from a survive to an advance to, okay, like you said, how can we make this better? How can we show the stories of resiliency? These people that were up in their attic shooting out the roof and, their whole lives washed away, but yet they come back stronger. And that was really the theme. And, I think we were so fortunate to have Governor Barbour and the leadership we had then was like, look, this is awful. Let's get after it, not, play the blame game and all that stuff. And all that. And that's where, those 2 or 3 weeks and the time afterwards, I'd go out and we'd do a story. I was like, man, this is journalism, or this is TV, we're really making a difference. And I think, when you do that, it helps with the rest of your life as well. You realize the things that aren't, the things that are important and the things you're like, wait a minute.
Oh my gosh. Everything else was, I remember we were out on the back deck after Katrina, and my son, Justin, who was young at the time, said to me, he said, what is it about Katrina that made the stars so much brighter? And I said, well, son, there's no power. And that the power, when the lights are on, it gets in the way, but you're now able to see it in its clear form. And Governor Barbour talked about in that special session where he talked about this, we got to do this for our kids and our kids' kids. And he talked about, this long road and this rural road. And he stopped at this woman who really needed help. And he offered to give them some supplies. And he said, no, I don't need that. If you'll go down that road and take a left on that dirt road, there's a family down there and it needs a lot more than me. Those stories that played out over and over and over again, Bill, it changes you forever. How can you forget that when number one, you're wanting to tell their story, but at the same time, what you're doing, the accumulation of those stories and experiences tells a story of resiliency that's unlike any other story in the United States. I really believe that to my soul. I know you do too.
Oh yeah, and I remember because I was still, after Katrina, we didn't do any sports, and then maybe 3 or 4 weeks into the high school football season, I remember I was at Bay High and I did a live shot, and all that stuff that it caused me, I'm burned out, I don't want to do this anymore. All the as the kids say, all the feels came back, and I was like, here we go. And just all those first time things, the first time since Katrina, we've had a lot of that since the pandemic, but after Katrina, it was really, they were milestones, and they showed the resiliency of the coast, the people, like those stories you talk about. We were all on an equal plane at that point. There weren't a lot of haves and have-nots. We were all trying to recover in different ways, whether it was physically or emotionally, financially, or whatever. And, that's what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's not a cliche. It's true.
It is so true, and we know that well. And that I would say that's that quote. I think Nietzsche or whoever said that is really, really important. And most coastal Mississippians, certainly the core of us who've been here for some time, know that extraordinarily well. Bill, it's been a pleasure. I probably should have you back more often, and we just talk about current events.
That's just scratch the surface of the minutia that's going on in my head. So
it's really a pleasure. Yeah, as I said with Brad, I always enjoyed the friendly competition. Man, we were out to beat each other. Yes. But when the going got tough, we were together. We had an emergency publication plan together, and we did stuff together. Had a great relationship with WLOX. It's been a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for spending some time with me.
My pleasure. All here. The pleasure's all on this side of the radio.
You bet. This has been Bill Snyder from WLOX. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Absolutely.